and a wonderful human being. And I've had several interactions with him. And after retirement, also met him and interacted with him. And this program is under the partnership agreement which our Aravali Institute of Management has signed with the GALTER, the Global Academy of Law, Tech and Research, promoted by Professor Bhandari. And the topic on which Professor Chhokar is going to speak, I think it is a topic which is relevant, contemporary, and I think it's at the top of mind of most of us. And therefore, it would be interesting to listen to Professor Chhokar as a management educator, as an administrator, and also as an activist. I think he is the best suited person to speak on this topic. So once again, hearty welcome to Professor Jagdeep Chhokar and to everybody. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, sir, for your cordial welcome. I may now request Professor Jagdeep Chhokar, sir, to address the participants.
I would
Please,
suggest, Shardaji, you kindly introduce Professor Jagdeep Chhokar, his introduction.
Yeah, madam, you please introduce. We have his introduction, very illustrious introduction.
Okay, sir. Okay. We have here with us eminent personality, Professor Jagdeep S. Chhokar, sir. Sir is a very concerned citizen. He is a mechanical engineer who worked in Indian Railways. He has been a professor, dean, and director in charge at Indian Institute of Management, Ahmedabad. He is a founder member of Association of he was working on electoral and political reforms for over 2 decades, and with Ajivika Bureau, he also worked on internal migration issues. We have such a wonderful personality who has worked continuously for democracy. This is a brief introduction of Professor Jagdeep Chhokar, sir. Once again, with this brief introduction, welcome you, sir. Welcome, please. May I now request Jagdeep, sir, to address the participants.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and thank you, Dr. Patel, for the introduction. At the outset, I thank Walter, the Global Academy of Law, Tech, Education and Research, and AIM, the Aravali Institute of Management, for inviting me to deliver this first Walter Aravali public lecture. Title of this talk, The State of India's Democracy Today, is interpretable in 2 ways. One can describe the state of India's democracy today, or one can attempt something like a critical assessment of the state of India's democracy today. I will attempt to do both interchangeably, and before that, I'll perhaps make some preliminary observations about democracy itself. Let me also add here that I do have a prepared script. I think given that democracy is something which is being enacted every day as we see and as we experience it, I will obviously deviate from my prepared talk from time to time. As a matter of fact, as of this morning, 2 things happened that make me think about deviating from my prepared talk. One was an article that I found in the Indian Express written by Professor Suhas Palchikar, formerly of Pune University, a very well-known political scientist. The other was something which happened around 9 o'clock or 10 o'clock in the morning, when some 60 to 70-year-old buildings set up the blessings of Jayaprakash Narayan and Acharya Vinoba Bhave were demolished in Banaras. Some of the participants who are perhaps younger may not know who Acharya Vinoba Bhave was. He was a Gandhian who spent a major part of his life walking around the country, actually walking on foot around the country, gathering, leading what was called the Bhudan movement, where he got people to donate land, which was then distributed amongst the landless and the deprived sections of society. These buildings were demolished this morning, and that was also an enactment of democracy in one way or the other. I'll perhaps refer to such events as I go along. But first, a few words about democracy, just to sort of set the stage. I think I believe most participants here know what democracy is all about. But let me just sort of set the stage a little bit. Without going into the Greek origins of democracy and without invoking the most often cited definition of democracy given by Abraham Lincoln during the Gettysburg Address on November 19, 1863,
Sorry
let
for
me say that,
interrupting you in between. Jagdeep sir, sorry for interrupting you in between. I
yes,
request all the participants to mute their mic, please. I request all the participants to mute their mic.
Otherwise, we will be constrained to delete the name because there is a lot of background disturbance and that would cause inconvenience to our honorable speaker. Please try to understand. Immediately mute your mics. Immediately, please. And also your webcam. Please.
My request is to please name the people whose mics are open so that they are
Mr.
able to
Manoj,
understand. They are not probably
Mr.
doing it.
Manoj,
No, please do everybody. Please.
no, I suggest the administrator mutes everybody's mics.
Professor Varun Arya, you are host. You can please mute everybody, including me, except Professor Chhokar.
Hello.
Please do that. Because under this disturbance, I think our speaker sir may not be comfortable in sharing his thoughts, and we will not be able to listen properly. So my humble request to all, please. Can we start now? Sharda ma'am, should we start now?
Yes, sir. Still some people have not muted their mic.
I'll ask Professor Varun Arya to mute because he is host here. He can mute everybody. So please start, sir. Sorry for interruption.
So
Please
Dr.
start.
Sharda can also mute everybody.
Sharda,
No,
ma'am,
sir,
you
I'm
also
not
mute.
a co-host. No, sir, I'm not co-host, so I don't have that control.
No, I have made Professor Varun Arya as host now, so he can
Yes, sir.
take necessary action.
Everybody's Mr. Dr. J.S. Pangaria, please mute your mic.
Yeah, please let us start. I think we should not waste the
Yes, sir.
valuable time.
Sorry, sir. Sorry for the interruption. Please start, sir.
Okay, thank you. I don't know where should I start from, but I'll start by making some comments about democracy. Although I am sure everybody that is participating in this discussion knows more than what I do about democracy. But in any case, what I was saying was that without going into the Greek origins of democracy and without invoking the most often cited definition of democracy given by Abraham Lincoln during the Gettysburg Address on November 19, 1863, let me say that democracy, according to my understanding, is a form of governance in which, at least theoretically and ideally, people govern themselves or at least feel that they govern themselves. Now, this ideal self-governance is usually operationalized by choosing representatives from amongst themselves or amongst ourselves who take on the responsibility of governing the people and society full time. And this is what is essentially called a representative democracy. The most common means of choosing representatives is through elections, of course. Though elections are very often considered synonymous with democracy, it must, and I underline must, it must be remembered that there is more to democracy than elections. This reminds me of a famous line by the Urdu poet Faiz Ahmad Faiz, who said, "Aur bhi dukh hai zamane mein mohabbat ke siwa," which would literally translate to, there are also other difficulties in life than love, or perhaps figuratively it might translate to, there is more to life than love. That is why the paraphrase, there is more to democracy than elections. Just a couple of examples of things other than elections that are important, actually essential for democracy, are things like freedom of expression, freedom of association, and rule of law. Now, coming back to elections, elections have sometimes been called the festival of democracy. It is not a surprise that a country, which is sometimes also called the land of festivals, has also completed a critical component of a democratic society as a festival. While there can be no objection to treating an election as a festival, but if we treat elections merely as festivals of fun, this may have serious implications for democracy in the country. Looked at another way, almost all festivals have a periodicity associated with them. A large number of them are celebrated annually, but some may occur monthly or even sometimes come around every 12th year. This may well have contributed to elections being considered as an event that is celebrated once every 5 years. This can and often is problematic because it makes voters passive during intervening periods. But for political parties and an overwhelming number of politicians, election-related activities go on all around the year. It can safely be said that everything political parties and political actors do is focused on the next election. It was in this context that Justice V.R. Krishna Iyer, one of the greatest jurists of our country, while writing the judgment, a famous judgment in Mohinder Singh Gill versus Central Election Commission in 1978, described democracy as, and I quote, a continual participative operation, not a cataclysmic periodic exercise, end of quotation. This is what should inform our understanding of elections. It is necessary for people at large, voters included, to be sensitized about how electoral activity is an ongoing affair, and it would be useful if they were on lookout for such activities because it could have a subtle and unobtrusive impact on them and their lives. Now, a simple and straightforward election, which may be considered as casting and counting of votes, along with its various refinements such as the dividing the country into constituencies, delimitation, and the electoral system, which the one in India is called the first past the post, or FPTP. Such refinements or such mechanisms have several unintended consequences, two of which can be referred to as the agency problem and majoritarianism. The well-known agency problem in the context of democracy and elections refers to the real risk of the so-called elected representatives becoming more interested in their own selves and keeping themselves in power almost perpetually, thus neglecting the welfare of those who elected them. Majoritarianism, on the other hand, does not need to be described. For example, when 51 out of a total of 100 participants vote one way and 49 vote another way, and the will of the 51 overrides the will of 49, this becomes democracy run exclusively on the strength of majority votes. Such democracies have a strong tendency to turn into what is often called the tyranny of the majority. It is to deal with such unintended consequences that institutional frameworks for governance of democratic societies have evolved over time. Arguably, the most basic institutional framework was conceptualized by the French Enlightenment political philosopher Montesquieu in his highly influential book, The Spirit of the Laws, which was published in 1848. He postulated that, and I quote, the freedom of the individual could best be guaranteed by the division of powers of the state between three distinct organs that could balance and check each other, a separation of powers. End of quotation. Montesquieu proposed that the entire political power of the state be described among three pillars or organs of the state: the legislature, the executive, and the judiciary. As we all know, the roles of these three are very clear. The legislature is to make the law of the land, the executive is to implement that law, and the judiciary is to interpret that law. This is the essence of the so-called principle of separation of powers. Each organ is free to operate in its area of authority and powers, and none of the organs is expected to interfere in the working of the other two organs. The separation of powers principle is necessary to be accompanied by the principle of checks and balances. The checks and balances principle postulates that if one of the organs either does not do its work or does not do its work properly, then the other two organs have the duty and the right to step in to balance the ship of the state. Checks and balances are designed to maintain the system of separation of powers, keeping each organ in its place. The idea is that it is not enough to separate the power and guarantee their independence, but the organs have constitutional means to defend their own legitimate powers from the encroachment of the other organs. This guarantees that the organs have the same level of power, that is, and are balanced so that they can limit each other, avoid use of power. The simplest and the most appropriate example being that of a three-legged stool. All three legs have to be of equal length. And if one of the legs becomes shorter or longer, the other two legs have to make appropriate adjustments for the stool to be stable. There is a gamut of institutions under the umbrellas of the legislature, the executive, and the judiciary. No democracy, particularly a representative democracy, can function unless supported by strong institutions. The only reasonable way to curb such a tendency of each organ trying to increase its power is to have strong institutions which owe their full allegiance to the constitutional values of the country and society. This becomes absolutely critical in a highly diverse society such as India. It is fortuitous that just 4 days ago, on August 8, 2023, the Chief Justice of India happened to comment on the importance of institutions while hearing the challenge to the abrogation of Article 370 of the Constitution of India. Heading a constitution bench of 5 judges, the Chief Justice remarked, and I quote again, in a constitutional democracy, seeking the opinions of the people should be done through established institutions. Any recourse to public opinion has to be sought through established institutions. This underlines the importance of institutions in a democracy like ours. Therefore, one way to understand the state of India's democracy today can be to see how some of the major institutions are functioning today. Now, most of the time when we refer to institutions, people talk of the bureaucracy, the judiciary, the justice system, and the police, and so on and so forth. But let me do something which is perhaps not often talked about. In my opinion, the most important and primary institution in the country is the institution of presidency. We have seen what has been happening to the institution of presidency over many, many years. And for those of us who are old enough to remember, it goes back to 1975, when the so-called emergency was imposed on the country by, in my opinion, the institution of presidency being perhaps not used appropriately. I am restraining myself when I say that. But in the recent past also, several things have happened. Let me, with all deference and due respect to the incumbent of the position, let me refer to what has happened to our current president. When our current president was elected on July 21, 2022, and when she took the oath of office on July 26, 2022, hundreds of millions of people in the country celebrated uninhibitedly, because this was a woman and of a tribal background, which was a unique assertion of the capacity of the country to provide equal opportunity to people of every class, creed, etc. So it was a wonderful occasion. And it was not long that the president justified her elevation to that position, or her election to that position. On November 26, 2022, she made a speech on the Constitution Day organized by the Supreme Court of India. In that speech, she referred to the situation prevailing in the jails of the country, and she said that I hear that more and more jails are to be made because the existing jails are overcrowded. She made a very incisive observation when she said, should we be making more jails, or should we be creating conditions that people do not have to be sent to jails? In that context, she was very circumspect, and she said, and I quote, I have left some things unsaid, which you should think about and understand. End of quotation. When she said you, she meant the judiciary and the executive. Now, the president showed restraint, maturity, grace by not telling the judiciary and the executive what to do. He said, there are some things that I am leaving unsaid. This sensitivity towards delicacy of human relations and proper etiquette is remarkable and has to be saluted. Now, very soon after that, things happened which sort of put this thing in doubt. The country's first indigenous aircraft carrier, INS Vikrant, was commissioned at the Cochin shipyard on September 2, 2022. Now, the president is the supreme commander of the armed forces, and it would have been appropriate for the supreme commander to commission this aircraft carrier, but it was not commissioned by the president, it was commissioned by the prime minister. Again, on September 8, 2022, a 28-feet statue of Netaji Subhash Chandra Bose was unveiled under the canopy at India Gate in New Delhi. Some people felt that this was an event of national importance, and the statue was at one end of a street called the Kartavya Path, which was formerly called Rajpath, at one end of which is the president's house, the Rashtrapati Bhavan. At the other end is this statue. Now, it was felt that an event of such importance could also have been done by the president, but no, it was done by the president of India, by the prime minister of India. Then we had the new building of the parliament inaugurated on 28th May 2023. The invitation issued by the Secretary General of Lok Sabha to invite dignitaries to this event said, and I quote here, to the dedication to the nation of the new building of parliament Shri Narendra Modi, Prime Minister, in the august presence of Shri Om Birla, Speaker Lok Sabha, on Sunday, May 28, and so on. Now, the Constitution of India says that the Parliament consists of the President of India, the Lok Sabha, and the Rajya Sabha. Now, and to quote from the Constitution, let me do this quotation, and I quote, "There shall be a Parliament for the Union which shall consist of the President and two houses to be known as respectively as the Council of States and the House of the People." Now, if Parliament consists of these three components, first of which is the President, it perhaps would have been appropriate in the fitness of things that the Parliament building be inaugurated by the President, who was in the country, in Delhi, and by all intents and by whatever was available, she would have been available for this. But once again, that did not happen. The President has had an unrivaled career in public service, starting as an elected councillor of the Rai Rangpur Nagar Panchayat in 1997. But she has been various stages of elected offices, but it seems the status and dignity of the President was not observed on this occasion. So much so about the institution of the presidency. The next important institution, in my opinion, in the country is the Parliament. Now, the Parliament over the last few years, I think since about 2011 and 12, and I say this with full responsibility, has been rendered pretty much completely redundant. I actually wrote a piece on this issue in one of the English dailies on September 6, 2012. And the title of that piece was "Denigration of Parliament, Protecting the National Interest with Disruptions." It was that time when the leader of the opposition in one of the houses of parliament wrote, and I quote, "If parliamentary accountability is subverted and a debate is intended to be used merely to put a lid on parliamentary accountability, it is then a legitimate tactic for the opposition to expose the government through parliamentary instruments available at its command." Now, this is what the then leader of opposition wrote in 2012. The legitimate tactic that the opposition party, which is now the party in power, had found was to completely prevent the parliament from functioning, thus preventing it from performing its legitimate and constitutional duty. The leader of the opposition in the other house of parliament would announce in the evening that they would not allow the parliament to function the next day. Now, I actually wrote this in 2012. This premeditated prevention of the parliament from functioning, which the particular party thought would be a legitimate tactic, in my opinion, was one of the greater offenses against democracy and thus against the nation, bordering on treason. Now, I maintain that this extremely harmful practice of disrupting the parliament has continued from 2012 till today, or till 2 days ago when the parliament was adjourned sine die. Now, 2012 to 2023 is a long time. And if we do not, and when I say we, I include every one of our citizens in the country, if we do not allow the parliament to function, what kind of democracy do we have? And please, I hope the listeners would know that I am including all political parties in this observation. Now, another instance of rendering the parliament completely redundant to vote on them in the Houses of Parliament. There have been many instances where the bills were handed over to the members as they were entering the House. The same bill would then be, quote unquote, presented to the House by the minister concerned and the vote held within minutes. The members thus vote on bills without even reading them. What to speak of thinking about them and discussing them? If this is not rendering the parliament redundant, I wonder what else is needed. There is yet another tactic that is often used to make the parliament redundant is to misclassify bills in order to ensure their passage. How this tactic is operationalized has happened in several instances, but two instances that I am personally familiar with is one of electoral bonds and the other is of amendments to the FCRA, Foreign Currency Regulations Act or Foreign Contributions Regulation Act. This happens when such issues are included in bills which are classified as money bills. Now, the advantage, or this is an advantage, I suppose, cynically speaking, is that the Rajya Sabha cannot disturb these bills at all. It can only make observations. Their passage in the Lok Sabha is enough for the parliament to pass it. Now, a money bill, according to Article 110 of the Constitution, is defined as, and I quote, a bill shall be deemed to be a money bill if it contains only provisions dealing with all or any of the following matters, namely, and one of these is the imposition, abolition, remission, alteration, or regulation of any tax. End of quotation. Now, to include the provision of electoral bonds in a money bill is an absolute violation of the Constitution, but such kind of actions have been continued by all governments, and the FCRA thing was very, very interesting, but I won't go into it because I think we will run out of time if I do that. Then there is another example of subversion of parliament, which happened in December 3, 2021. And let me quote this in some detail because it is important. The deputy chairman, while presiding over the House, put a motion to vote. Instead of, I thought there is a video, the link to which is available, which should be watched. And this is what happens in the video. As one sees that video, one realizes that the deputy chairman says, those who say aye, and the ayes are hardly audible. And then when he says those opposed to the bill say no, and the no's are loud and clear. But the presiding officer goes on to say, I think the ayes have it, the ayes have it, the ayes have it. Now, these are the things which make the parliament redundant. And that is extremely disturbing because parliament and the presidency are perhaps the highest institutions in the land. Now, let me come to the judiciary. Under normal circumstances, judiciary is supposed to be the last bastion for protecting the citizens from the excesses of the state. And since we are talking in a setup where we are concerned with the law, tech and education, let me quote former Chief Justice M. Patanjali Shastri when he was writing this judgment in the case of State of Madras versus V.G. Roe on March 31, 1952. And this quotation is a little long, but I would seek your indulgence. The quotation begins, and I quote, before proceeding to consider this question, we think it right to point out what is sometimes overlooked, that our Constitution contains express provisions for judicial review of legislation as to its conformity with the Constitution. Unlike in America, where the Supreme Court has assumed extensive powers of reviewing legislative acts under cover of the widely interpreted due process in the 5th and the 14th Amendments. If then the courts in this country face up to such important and none too easy task, it is not out of any desire to tilt at the legislative authority in a crusader spirit, but in discharge of a duty plainly laid upon them by the Constitution. And this is when the most important part of the court comes, as to which this court has been assigned the role of the sentinel on the key weave. Now, judiciary is also supposed to be one of the 3 independent organs of the state, and therefore it should not be in the other 2 organs, the executive and the legislature should not interfere with the functioning of the judiciary. I don't know what to say, but appointing a former Chief Justice of India as governor of a state, which happened, the appointment of the retired Chief Justice P. Sathasivam, in which the Hindu, for example, the Hindu newspaper wrote, and I quote, he denied that his appointment had anything to do with his judgment quashing the first information report against BJP President Amit Shah in the Tulsi Ram Prajapati case in April 2013. And the quotation says, at that time, nobody would have expected that Mr. Shah would become BJP president. We did not give Mr. Shah a clean chit in this case. In fact, I shifted the Sohrabuddin case to Maharashtra. In the same judgment, the court gave liberty to CBI to file a supplementary charge sheet against Mr. Shah. Now, when the Chief Justice, the former Chief Justice, while being appointed as the governor, has to explain his conduct in these words, I don't know what to say about what is called a statement of values of judicial life, which was unanimously adopted by a conference of Chief Justices held on 3rd and 4th of December 1999. One of which was that a judge is expected to let his judgments speak for themselves. He shall not give interview to media about his judgments. Then I bring this out because this is a case where the executive, perhaps advertently or inadvertently, indicates to the judiciary or senior judicial executives that if they behave themselves, they will have some reward at the end of it. And of course, we recently have had a case where a former Chief Justice was nominated as a member of the Rajya Sabha by the President of India. And this Chief Justice just 3 days ago questioned or challenged the basic structure doctrine of the famous, I forget, Keshavanand Bharati case. I mean, the same doctrine that he had used in multiple judgments during his career as a judge. With approval, he ended up questioning it as Rajya Sabha. Therefore, the executive or the political wing of the government interfering with judicial functioning is not unheard of. A very, very serious situation, I am sure a lot of us know about a judge by the name B.H. Loya dying under questionable circumstances in 2014. This is a long saga. He had gone to attend a wedding on December 1, 2014, and he was to pronounce the judgment in a controversial case where the Supreme Court had said that the judge should not be transferred. His predecessor was transferred a day before a significant order was to be pronounced. And when Judge Loya, through his action, seemed to be a little difficult, quote unquote, difficult, he unfortunately passed away under mysterious circumstances. This is a very controversial issue, but this is an issue where doubts about the functioning of the judiciary come up. Then there are other examples like, a judge of the Delhi High Court held a late night hearing on February 26, 2020 about the communal violence in Delhi. And he had asked the police commissioner of Delhi to appear in his court the next day. And overnight, this judge was transferred from Delhi to Chandigarh. And he was asked to take over in Chandigarh the next day. Over time, it has come to be known that this judge, Justice Muralidhar, was never elevated to the Supreme Court, and he retired as the Chief Justice of the High Court. There are other examples. For example, there was a High Court judge called Justice Akhil Qureshi. He was a judge of the Gujarat High Court. He was not made a Chief Justice when his turn came to become Chief Justice of the Gujarat High Court. And he was then, after a long time, made a Chief Justice, but sent to Tripura, where there were only 3 judges, whereas earlier he had been nominated as Chief Justice of the Madhya Pradesh High Court, which had a strength of 53 judges. But that was not acceptable to powers that be. Justice Madan Lokur, a retired judge of the Supreme Court, who himself is known for his frank views, said about Justice Akhil Qureshi, and I quote here, "Well, according to me, Justice Qureshi is an outstanding judge. He certainly deserved to be brought to the Supreme Court. It is a great loss to the judiciary and justice delivery system that Akhil Qureshi was not appointed a judge of the Supreme Court." Once again, there's talk that Justice Qureshi, when he was a judge of the Gujarat High Court, did not grant bail to the current Home Minister, and he had to be in jail for 2 days, and therefore there was a sense of resentment against him. It has also been written by Justice Markandeya Kajju, formerly a judge of the Supreme Court, that no appointments to the Supreme Court were made for 19 months because Justice Rohington Nariman, who was a member of the Collegium, refused to agree to any appointment to the Supreme Court until Justice Qureshi was elevated to the Supreme Court, and that did not happen. Therefore, for 19 months, no appointment to the Supreme Court was made. Now, all these things do not show that our judiciary is really able to function the way it is. Then we have instances of the executive openly defying the judiciary. And there are 2 very recent cases in this regard. One is, of course, the extension of service granted to the director of the Enforcement Directorate. On 11th of July, the Supreme Court said that the 2 extensions of service granted to the director of the Enforcement Directorate were illegal and that he must not continue in office beyond July 31. On July 28, the Union of India comes to the Supreme Court seeking another extension for the same person till 15th of November. And of course, the judiciary granted him extension till, I think, 15th of September, I believe. But the interesting thing is that from the 11th of course, when on the 11th of July, the Supreme Court said that these previous extensions were illegal, under normal circumstances, his services should have been completed on 11th of July or 12th of July. But as a matter of grace, I suppose, Supreme Court said that let him continue till 31st of July, presumably for alternative arrangements to be made. But on the 28th of July, when the Union of India came to the Supreme Court, there was no mention of any even initiation of making alternative arrangements. So when it comes to so-called mens rea, did the government have any intention to replace him following the Supreme Court judgments? Or they were just waiting and they thought that we'll go on 28th and we will get an extension for him, although his previous two extensions were illegal. And the same thing happened. But the other is a bill which was introduced in the Rajya Sabha on as late as 2 days ago on the 10th about the appointment of election commissioners and the chief election commissioner. The Supreme Court had recently given a judgment where it had said that the appointment of election commissioners and the chief election commissioner ought to be done through a collegium and so on. There are two issues here. One is that the Supreme Court said that the Parliament has not made a law and it should make a law. And the Supreme Court suggested that till a law is made, there will be a collegium consisting of the Prime Minister, the Leader of the Opposition, and the Chief Justice of India. The bill that was introduced 2 days ago says that the appointment will be made by a collegium consisting of the Prime Minister, the Leader of the Opposition, and a minister nominated by the Prime Minister. Now, this in and of itself is fine because a law is being made as desired by the Parliament. That's okay. But in the judgment, there was a huge argument consisting of more than about 70 pages, which said that the Election Commission should be independent and it should also be seen to be independent. And it should not be that actually the judgment wrote that we don't need or we don't want an election commissioner who is beholden to the Prime Minister. But when we have a collegium consisting of the Prime Minister, Leader of the Opposition, and a minister who will receive nominations from a search committee consisting of the Cabinet Secretary and two secretaries to the Government of India. Now, it is very clear that this search committee will itself choose people which are acceptable to the government. And therefore, there is a, call it a pre-screening or call it you control the choices that are given to the final body. The independence of the Election Commission certainly becomes doubtful. The other thing in this case was very interesting that while the case was actually being heard in the Supreme Court by a constitutional bench, the government decided to appoint a new election commissioner to a position which had been lying vacant for 8 months. And on this also the constitutional bench commented, and they said that it was the appointment of a person to such a position in less than 24 hours from initiation to the issue of the warrant of appointment by the president happening in less than 24 hours is very mysterious. This is what the court said. The other thing that the court also noted that within those 24 hours, this person had sought a voluntary retirement from the government, and the voluntary retirement had been sanctioned, along with his appointment as the election commissioner being made. So such actions show that the executive attempts to control what the judiciary does, and whether it succeeds or not, I think it is for all of us to decide. Then the third is the bureaucracy. Third or the fourth institution, no, it's the third institution, is the bureaucracy. Now, the bureaucracy is also part of the executive. Therefore, it may sound very kind of a contradiction in terms that the executive manipulates the executive. And who is the manipulator and who is the manipulated? Now, the solution to this puzzle apparently lies in Article 50 of the Constitution, which says, and I quote, "The state shall take steps to separate the judiciary from the executive in the public services of the state." Now, end of quotation. However, the executive actually consists of two distinct parts. There is what might be called the political executive, which are the ministers, etc., who are elected and therefore they become part of the executive. And on the other hand, there is what might be called the administrative executive, which is the bureaucracy. The political component of the executive may be thought to consist of the president, governor, the prime minister, chief minister, ministers, and other political appointees who execute or who can exercise executive power. The administrative component of the executive may be thought to consist of the bureaucracy or, to quote, services under the union and states, which are described in Part 14 of the Constitution. Now, another slightly simpler way of thinking about the difference is that the administrative executive is permanent. The bureaucracy is permanent, whereas the political executive may be considered temporary, depending on which party gets to form the government. Now, if we look at it this way, then we can answer the question as to who manipulates the executive. It is the political executive which manipulates the administrative executive. Now, given that the manipulator and the manipulated are so intimately connected, it is very difficult to distinguish between the two. Only one major example I will present here, and this pertains to the functioning of what is often thought of as the major and very visible manifestation of the state, the law and order maintainer, police, and the premier investigative agency of the country, the Central Bureau of Investigation, the CBI. Now, I don't know how many of us remember that on the night of October 23 and 24, 2018, officials of Delhi police encircled or cordoned off the office of the CBI on the night of October 24. The reason for this unseemly spectacle was a standoff between the head of the CBI, his director Alok Verma, and the number 2 in the organization, the special director called Rakesh Asthana. Now, the Economic Times had reported, and I quote that report, a few days ago, Verma had ordered an FIR against Asthana, who then moved court for protection from arrest. An official who worked with Asthana arrested. The midnight high drama had its origins in a flurry of meetings held by a watchdog, a cabinet panel, and ministry bureaucrats in quick succession. Members of the Central Vigilance Commission met in the afternoon to consider the goings-on in the CBI. After the meeting, the CVC informed the government that corruption allegations leveled by Asthana against CBI head Verma was serious and Verma was not cooperating with the CBI, etc., etc. Now, as all this happened, one of these people moved the Supreme Court, and the PM-led panel decided to transfer Verma as Director General of Delhi Fire Service, a post which he refused to accept, and wrote to the government that he be treated as retired. All this was happening with intimate political executives' interference or blessing. Now, the way appointments in the CBI have happened are a long story. Again, there is a long quotation here from the police, from the Supreme Court. We had another situation some time ago, which some of us may remember or may not remember, that a person was arrested from Delhi by the Punjab police. When they were taking this person to Punjab from Delhi, the Punjab police party was confronted by Haryana police, because Haryana is governed by BJP and Punjab is governed by the Aam Aadmi Party, and so was Delhi. So there was a confrontation between police from 3 states. The Delhi police, which is under the Home Ministry, and the Haryana police, which are under the BJP government, and the Punjab police, which were under the Aam Aadmi Party. Now, these are kinds of things which happen when political executive interferes in what the administrative executive does. Then we have other constitutional institutions. And I suppose, given the kind of work I've been doing for over 20 years, the institution of interest to me is the Election Commission of India. Now, I will only quote one example, which happened during the 2019 Lok Sabha election. Now, there were people thought that the model code of conduct was being violated by some people, particularly the Prime Minister, and a complaint or several complaints were made to the Election Commission of India, on which the Election Commission of India did not take any action as far as was publicly known. Then there was a petition filed in the Supreme Court, when the Supreme Court directed the Election Commission of India to election commissioners voted one way and one voted the other way. Then when the minutes of this meeting were apparently circulated among the 3 people, the dissent of one commissioner was not recorded. This commissioner reportedly said that his dissent should be recorded, and unless his dissent was recorded, he will not attend any other meetings. Then it seemed another meeting was held to decide whether the dissent should be recorded or not. And again, in this meeting, by a 2-to-1 majority, the Election Commission decided that the dissent will not be recorded. It came to be publicly known that this election commissioner who dissented was a person by the name Ashok Lavasa. Now, soon after this came to be known, a series of actions were taken against Ashok Lavasa and his family. It was reported that in September, the Income Tax Department issued notices to 3 members of the Lavasa family, including his wife, for alleged non-declaration of income and disproportionate assets. Subsequently, it came to light that the central government had reportedly written to 11 public sector undertakings to verify whether Ashok Lavasa had exercised, quote-unquote, undue influence during his tenure in the Power Ministry from 2009 to 2013. A confidential communication was reported to have been issued to the chief vigilance officers of the PSUs, quote, with the approval, end of quote, of the Power Secretary. It was reported that the letter dated August 29, 2019 said, and I quote, it has been alleged that Shri Ashok Lavasa IAS during his tenure in the Ministry of Power from September 2009 to December 2013 as Joint Secretary, Additional Secretary, Special Secretary, used his official position to exercise undue influence to benefit few companies / associate companies, end of quotation. Now, all this was going on, and Ashok Lavasa finally resigned from the position as election commissioner. And of course, subsequently joined the Asian Development Bank as a vice president. This is an example, assuming all that is true, that the executive or the government interferes in the functioning of constitutional institutions or authorities like the Election Commission of India and perhaps the Comptroller and Auditor General of India. Now, the examples that I have given, I believe, show that the executive, particularly the political component of the executive, has emasculated and subverted the institutions that are a bulwark for checks and balances in a democracy. The instances indicate a pattern of deliberate, systematic, and planned schema of rendering all the institutions of governance and democracy completely ineffective. When such institutions and checks and balances are prevented from performing their legitimate constitutional mandates and are reduced to being handmaidens of the political party in power, the party itself being tightly controlled by one or at most a couple of individuals, the impact on democracy is obvious. At the same time, we have the case of the media, which also is an institution of democracy, the so-called fourth estate, which has also been made completely dependent on either government advertisement revenues or through commercial compulsions through ownership by large corporates. And then the same media perhaps is not as honest a reporter of news as it should be. Let me now share some data. We can begin with the what is called the Global State of Democracy Index. This is compiled by an institution called International Institute for Democracy and Electoral Assistance, which is an organization of 32 countries, of which India is a founding member. And they call it the Global State of Democracy Index. It scores 158 countries on 5 major attributes, such as fundamental rights, checks on government, impartial administration, participatory engagement, and representative government. These are sort of measured on several sub-indicators. India has been consistently characterized as a flawed democracy. There was a drastic increase in civil society participation between 1978 to 2012, but then it has drastically declined since 2015. The state of civil liberties is the same, and there has been a significant dip in India's record on personal security, freedom of association, gender equality, and basic welfare. Media integrity has also got a huge beating. Based on media integrity, India fared better than both the global and South Asian average till 2012, but subsequently its position has plummeted. It is not only the international idea or the Global State of Democracy Index. There is something called the World Democracy Index, published by the Economist Intelligence Unit. In 2019, it showed India at number 41 as a flawed democracy. Of course, Sri Lanka was also a flawed democracy. Bangladesh, Bhutan, and Nepal were hybrid regimes, and Pakistan and Afghanistan were authoritarian. After having reached the highest ever position of 27 in 2014, just 2 points short of becoming a full democracy, India slipped to 42 in 2017, which was its worst ever. This has been confirmed also by the Freedom of the World report and the World Press Freedom Index. in which in 2019 we were 140 out of 160 countries. The evidence of so-called declining democracy seems to be incontrovertible. We have been called a flawed democracy, a partial democracy, an electoral autocracy, and justice, and not justice, but Professor Harbansh Mukhia, formerly of the Jawaharlal Nehru University, writing in the Hindu in 2020 September, called India a new democracy. At this juncture, I would like to show a couple of slides which show us what can be done or what we as citizens can do. May I request Professor Varun Arya to show the first of the two slides, please? Professor Varun Arya, can you hear me? No, I don't think he can hear me. Dr. Shada Patil? Okay, here is the... Yes, the first of these two slides. I think it is partly, anyway. It says democracy involves hardship. The hardship of unceasing responsibility of every citizen, where the entire people do not take a continuous and considered part in public life. There can be no democracy in any meaningful sense of the term. Democracy is always a beckoning goal, not a safe harbor. For freedom is an unremitting endeavor, never a final achievement. Now, this is a quotation from a judgment written by a US Supreme Court judge by the name Felix Frankfurter, who was appointed to the US Supreme Court in 1939. He passed away in 1965. However, it is the last sentence of this quotation, and Professor Arya, can you show the next slide, please? This is the last sentence, which says, that is why no office in the land is more important than that of being a citizen. Now, this is important because I think what we see in the country is that when we ask anybody, who are you, etc., people say, I'm a professor, I'm a doctor, I'm an engineer, I'm a bureaucrat, and so on and so forth. Nobody says or thinks that he or she is a citizen. The irony is that before we can become anything else, we have to be a citizen. So therefore, being a citizen is something that we forget. And the state of democracy depends on the citizens. And this being conscious of citizenship is something what somebody has said, that fish will be the last to discover water because they survive, they exist in water. We stay in a democracy, we survive in a democracy, and we do not realize that citizenship is an active duty. The hardship of unceasing responsibility of every citizen. And this is where I think the democracy suffers. And I will, before I finish, let me refer to the thing that I mentioned in the very beginning, an article written by Professor Suhas Palshikar in the Indian Express of today. And he ends by saying, and I'll read the last paragraph, and I quote, independence was about asserting our individual and collective identity as citizens. Ironically, as we complete 75 years and more of that assertion, we find ourselves voluntarily reduced to the status of willing, bulldozed multitudes. End of quotation. Now, this condition of citizenship, I reflects the state of democracy, of India's democracy today, better than anything else. And I will leave all the participants to arrive at their own judgments on what the state of democracy is. And I think the state of democracy is extremely worrying. Thank you very much. I once again thank GALTER and AIM for inviting me to this lecture, and I thank all the participants for listening to me for such a long time. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Professor Jagdeep Chhokar, sir. It was a wonderful lecture. Now we shall proceed further with the question answer session, which I request Professor M.K. Bhandari, sir, to coordinate. Bhandari, sir, please. Bhandari, sir? RS, sir, can you please unmute him? I think he is muted.
He can unmute himself. Yeah.
Yeah, Bhandari, sir? Okay, if anybody has questions, you can ask, you can raise your hands and
I
unmute
see
yourself.
a hand raised by Madhu Bhaduri for quite some time.
Yeah.
Muted?
Kindly unmute yourself and ask the question.
That madam, I think her audio is not connected, sir. She has some problem with her audio.
Oh, okay, that's all right.
Yeah.
You can ask the question in the chat box also.
Mr. Manoj, if you have questions, please unmute yourself and ask. RS, sir.
Yeah.
Participants are telling they are unable to unmute themselves.
So I think what I will do, I'm not very comfortable.
It says the host has disallowed questions. We cannot unmute ourselves. Somebody has posted in the chat box, Mr. Manoj.
Okay. Dr. Sharda, I have made you the host. Can you kindly?
Yes, yes, yes.
Okay.
Yes, yes, yes.
Now you control and manage. Yeah.
Yes, I have unmuted everyone. You can unmute yourself and ask questions.
Hello.
Yeah, please,
My
Mr. Lokesh.
name is Lavkesh Chandra. I have a question. We talked about legislation, redundancy. My question to you, sir, is that how defection law actually enables this redundancy?
Well, the anti-defection law, as it was introduced in the Schedule 10 of the Constitution, came to be misused and gave actually the problem with the anti-defection law in all its forms being that it gives greater power to the political party. Actually, a very interesting factoid is that the word political party does not exist in the text entire text of the Constitution anywhere. It came into the Constitution only when the anti-defection law was introduced. And therefore, the anti-defection law gave even more power to political parties. Now, that in and of itself may have been fine, but the problem is that the political parties in a country are not democratic in their internal functioning. Therefore, a non-democratic institution has acquired greater power than ever through the anti-defection law. And the anti-defection law will not be of any use until political parties are made to function democratically in their internal function. This is the basic with the anti-defection law.
Sir, may I ask another question if you permit?
Yeah, excuse me, I am back. There was some net connection issue. Before we start formal question answer session, which I am supposed to conduct, I thank you very much, sir, for very insightful and critical evaluation of Indian democratic institutions. I have some footnotes to share. You have highlighted some worrisome aspects of judiciary, legislature, executive, constitutional institutions like election commission. Yes, nobody can disagree with those worrisome aspects which are undermining our democratic credentials. But sir, let me tell you, let me share with you, in spite of all these uh, troubling features which occur or reoccur from time to time, I am of the opinion, and one can differ with me, because dissent is the essence of democracy, that the world over, if we compare the global scenario, our democratic setup and traditions are still far better. Could we imagine that the president of a country, I would name United States, Mr. Trump, would monitor and plan attack on the parliament, violent attack on the parliament during his presidency because he has lost the election? Unfortunately, and I mean fortunately, we have not gone to that lowest ebb. Anyway, that does not justify what you have highlighted. And one thing more, sir, I would like to draw your attention toward judiciary. The watershed moment for judiciary, in my opinion, was when three sitting judges during office hours went to the home of one judge and conducted a press conference
I can't hear Professor Bhandari, and therefore I think his frame is stuck. I don't know if there's a problem with my system or with everybody else.
No, sir, he is not audible.
Yeah,
His
I thank you very much, sir, for your very insightful lecture. And now it is open for question and answer for next 15 minutes. So my request is that please ask one question at a time only, short question, so that sir can respond to it pointedly.
There are some questions in the chat also. Professor Bhandari, can you can you read them out for Professor Chhokar to answer? Professor Chhokar, there is a question that what excites and inspires you to pursue law being
Sorry, yeah. Please, Professor Arya, yes, please.
Professor Chhokar, there is a question, what excites and inspires you to pursue law being a mechanical engineer? This is from Lalit Paliwal.
Okay, Professor Varun, you conduct the session.
No, it's
because
okay.
my connection is little unstable.
Yeah, Professor Chhokar.
Well, I am not sure whether this question has anything to do with the topic that we are discussing today. I studied mechanical engineering. I studied management, and then I studied behavioral sciences, and then I studied law. So I have done many things in my life for a variety of reasons, and I don't think this is the forum to go into that.
Okay, fair enough.
Sharda ma'am, I think for a moment, you all can switch on your webcam and we can have a group picture, group screenshot. Then the question answer will continue. Please quickly. Sharda ma'am, can you take a quick screenshot?
Yeah.
Yeah, my
Yes, sir,
request to
I'll take
all,
screenshot.
for a moment, please start your webcam so that we can have a group screenshot and we can use it for our website and social media. Professor Varun Arya has a huge connections. He will also use it. Quickly, please. Take 2-3 pics. I would request quickly to please start webcam. Yeah. Then we will restore question and answer session. Yeah. Ma'am, you please take.
Yes, sir, I took, sir.
Yeah. Then another one also. There are other participants. I think all will not come in one frame. You can take. Please switch on. My request to you, please. Please do it fast. Yeah, you can take, please.
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you. Over to you, Professor Arya. Professor Arya, I acknowledge the presence of our friend from Singapore, Andrew Ko. Andrew, you can also switch on your webcam. Our Galter member, Professor Andrew Ko from Singapore. If you can listen to me, you can please switch on your webcam. And if there is any other international participant, can also switch on. Andrew, can you listen to me? Okay, please continue. Over to you, Professor Arya.
Professor Chhokar, there is a question from Divakar Garg. If political party is more powerful than democracy, are we going towards China and Russia?
It was very hard to say. I think the overall system, I do not claim that I know enough about China and Russia, but yes, that is true. I think with China and Russia, there are really no other political parties. There are just one party. Now, one party democracy is different from a multi-party democracy. India continues to be a multi-party democracy, and so long as it is a multi-party democracy, I don't think we would become like China and Russia. But as I said, democracy is being enacted every day. So what would be enacted tomorrow and in the next few days, I don't know. So it's very difficult to predict what will happen in the future. It will depend on what all of us as citizens do. What happens to a democracy is what citizens do, as I said in the quotation that I showed and the quotation that I read from Professor Palchikar.
Prabhat, you want to ask question? You can ask question. Unmute yourself and.
Yes, good evening. I am Dr. Prabhat Kumar here. I would just like to mention that there are different tiers of political reform you can debate and discuss. Now, after 75 years of Indian democracy, so to say, we need the first tier of reforms. Majorly, we discuss at the third, fourth, at the 10th level of reforms, which will not work out unless you reform at the first year. And some of the components I can highlight. Currently, what is democracy? We have right to vote, and it comes with that and ends with that. We have no right to select a candidate, no right to select party representatives, no right to select anybody, anything else. So if you start with the grassroots democracy, if a political party is registered in every village and there is a direct election from village onwards to the central level, where there is a term limit, there is a age bar, and there are other damming of the rivers, like, activity we do, then only the political parties will reform. Otherwise, a president is a self-appointed at the top, and he starts appointing right down to the district level. And the same representatives will elect him again as president. This is a total fraud on Indian democracy. So our constitutional reform, we need large-scale constitutional reforms, but the ultimate question is, who will bell the cat? I have written a book, Reinventing Indian Democracy, a Vision for Second Republic, where I have highlighted some elements of those changes we need to introduce. We visualize a country where a Vivek Ramaswamy can declare himself a Republican candidate and garner 6% votes. So the first year reforms are very necessary if we want flight of capital to stop, if we want large scale migration of Indian manpower to
Prabhat, can you
slow
ask the
down.
question? Prabhat? Yeah,
Yes. So
yeah.
my question is regarding the first year reforms. We need to carry out, and this should be the first and foremost objective of any constitutional reform in Indian democracy. What is your opinion?
Well, I think you have not really asked a question except to say, what is my opinion? My opinion is that I may agree with all that you say, and I totally agree. Political parties must be made democratic. But the question that you yourself said is, who will do this and how will it be done? My opinion is that what you are saying is perfectly fine, but that doesn't tell us who will do it and how will it be done.
So why not try a PIL in Supreme Court with some
My
of
dear
these?
sir, PILs have been tried. And I would humbly request that we are doing all that we can. If you feel this PIL should be done, please go ahead and do this PIL and we will support you in that.
Sir, can I add one thing, Professor Chhokar, to this question? I think PIL, public interest litigation, has been overly used. It has become a fashion to engage judiciary even in making laws and seeking directions in policy matters. Why not we should make accountable our legislature and executive rather than rushing to the Supreme Court for every issue? This is not a healthy practice which is being developed, that for every issue we should go for PIL. And that would undermine the prowess, the strength of the Supreme Court in long run. That is my view. Okay. Okay. Thank you.
I respect you, sir.
Pardon?
I respect your view. I have no question about your view.
So kind of you. Thank you very much.
But I will only add that PILs must be used with great caution.
Exactly.
PIL should not be used as private interest litigation.
Yes.
I totally agree with you, but I will not say that PIL should not be filed. PIL should be filed with great caution. And I say that as a person who has been, as a member of the association that I am, I have been involved with several PILs. And I believe that we file our PILs with extreme caution. for issues which are truly of public interest, for which either there is no remedy available or other remedies through the executive and bureaucracy and the constitutional institutions, remedies have been tried repeatedly, and when they do not work, then we go to the judicial.
Right, sir. Right. That's the right approach, sir. That is the right approach. Agree, sir. Agree.
Professor Chhokar, there is a question from Loknath Rao. What is the likelihood that election commission is compromised in 2024 general elections?
It's a very leading and a controversial question.
Interesting. Interesting.
I could answer it in several ways. Does the question mean that the election commission has not been compromised earlier? In 2019, the case of Ashok Lavasa that I mentioned, was the election commission not compromised? So this is it's a very complex issue. It is very difficult to say what compromise means and how the compromise gets operationalized. It's very difficult to say.
Yeah, thanks.
Say this. No, but I will say this. The functioning of the election commission leaves a lot to be desired, and a lot of it is mentioned in the Supreme Court judgment on the appointment of election commissioners. I would strongly urge Mr. Loknath Rao to read the judgment.
Sure, sir. Sure.
Perhaps answer your question.
The premise is if every institution of democracy is subverted, there is no reason to believe that election commission cannot be, because they are staffed by a complete bunch of jokers in the present time. So, yeah.
Sorry, sir. Sorry, on this platform, these kind of words we don't allow, sir. Jokers and like this. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. We are accountable to the system, and at least we won't use our platform to use these words. Please excuse me.
Yeah, sure.
Okay, there is a question from Kumar Swami. Why did the Supreme Court start this practice of PIL? Why not ask the government to come up with a PIL law?
It is there.
Okay.
It is there.
Thank you, Professor Bhandari.
Sir, I have a question if Professor Varun Arya permits me.
Yeah, please.
Sir, you have discussed issues which are worrisome developments during last 10-15 years broadly. Sir, don't you think the worst thing which happened to Indian democracy was the imposition of emergency just to save one person? And it was told by some people, I generally never take names, that it is a festival of discipline. All institutions were throttled, and there was supersession of judges, censorship was leaders were imprisoned, and what not happened. I don't belong to any political ideology, sir, but I think, could there have been anything worse than that? What is your view, sir?
To answer the last bit of your question, there could have been a lot worse than that. Let me leave it at that.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. Yes, sir.
There is a question that most of the PIL filed by a political party for own benefit. I don't know.
No.
No, that's not true.
No, not at all. In fact, they are harassed. They उनके लिए तो एक बहुत बड़ा ये हेडेक है. कुछ केसेस में हो सकता है.
No, Professor Bhandari, I beg to differ. I am not sure political parties are bothered by PILs. As a matter of fact, political parties get PIL filed by their people.
Okay, sir. Okay.
And there is a very well-known PIL filer. I don't want to name anybody here.
Yes.
PILs on behalf of a particular party all the time.
Maybe.
There is a question from Praveen Patel. We are the largest democracy of the world, but we have failed to the people of India, as there is no check and balance.
Well, that's question, sir. That's a statement, and I
Yeah.
have nothing to add. I wonder if Madhu Bhaduri is still able to unmute herself or not. Her hand is up. I just see this hand up all the time.
Please take up this issue, Professor
Yeah.
Arya.
I don't know.
I think we can have 2-3 more questions and then we can offer vote of thanks. What do you
Yeah.
think, Professor Arya?
Yeah. I think
Thank
there
you.
are no questions. We can have the vote of thanks.
Okay.
Yeah.
So it is a great honor and privilege today for all of us that Professor Chhokar has spared his valuable time at the senior age and has spoken frankly and shared his mind and views frankly about the state of democracy in India. He has quoted several instances, the real instances, which have occurred during last 10 years, 15 years. And certainly they are worrisome developments for any healthy growth or healthy life of the democratic traditions. And we as citizens must always be aware and enlightened. This lecture is a part of that enlightenment, that what is happening in the country, and we must raise our voices at appropriate places, appropriate fora, and maybe, as somebody said, if necessary, PIL also. Yes, that is also a tool. We may differ on certain issues, but certainly we must share our concern. And I am thankful to Professor Chhokar for sharing his concern, and he is taking up all these issues on his big platform, Association for Democratic Reforms, and in few cases he has also filed PIL and has taken some positive judgments. And I am seeing that some members are now trying to join at this moment. I'm sorry, this is not the way of joining the event at your free will. After all, there must be some discipline. You cannot join at the end of the event. Anyway, I'm admitting, but I strongly dislike this fashion. Anyway, so on behalf of Aravali Institute of Management, Professor Varun Arya, who arranged your lecture on our request, and on behalf of all the members of GALTER, some of them are present here also, I wish to thank Professor Jagdeep S. Chhokar, the former director of the IIM Ahmedabad and the other positions he has held. And we look forward to such thought-provoking lectures and sessions in future also. And I am also thankful to Professor Varun Arya for making Professor Chhokar available to this platform, and for his continuous support and advice. And I'm also thankful to all the all the participants who have spared their time Saturday evening with us for about 2 hours. And my sincere thanks to our convener, Dr. Shraddha Patil, who has conducted this event. Thank you all. Namaskar. Jai Hind. Jai Bharat.
Thank you.
Over to you, Professor Varun. Over to you, Professor Varun.
Yeah,
for final words.
Thank you very much, Professor Chhokar. And we look forward to having you again in some other event sometime in the future. And well, thanks to everybody. I think it all went off very well. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. So
Let's
let us conclude it. So let us conclude it.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you. Thank you so